Story 1 by D.H. When I was 19, I found myself working as an Uber driver. At that point, I hadn't quite figured out what direction I wanted my life to take, so college hadn't started yet. Uber was just a means to pay the bills until I could sort things out. On this particular night, I planned to drive from 7 p.m. until 3 a.m., my preferred hours as I've always been more of a night owl. Around 11 p.m., I picked up a woman from a bar and drove her 35 minutes to a secluded area on the city's edge where her home was located. After dropping her off, I received another pickup request from a location about 10 minutes away. Reluctantly, I accepted, hoping the next passenger would head back towards the city where more work awaited. The road to the pickup spot wound through farmland, an empty stretch with tall crops swaying in the wind. As I approached the farmhouse at the end of a thin dirt road, I noticed it was eerily quiet and dark. I honked lightly to signal my arrival, but instead of coming from the house, a sudden tap on my passenger door startled me. Without looking back at the road I had just traversed, I assumed the man must have come from the house. He leaned in through the window, his expression unreadable, and confirmed he was my Uber passenger. He glanced nervously around the back seat before asking for help to carry something from the house to the car. Being on the job, I instinctively agreed, assuming it was just luggage or something innocuous. However, as he hurried towards the dark farmhouse without looking back, a sense of unease crept over me. I followed cautiously, the door gaping open revealing an empty, unlit hallway. There was no sign of the man or any activity inside. Calling out tentatively yielded no response, and the silence only deepened, punctuated by the rustling of wind-blown crops. Sensing danger, I fled back to my car, sped through the field, and onto the main road, cancelling the Uber ride in my haste. Reflecting on the incident, I regretted not alerting the authorities, haunted by what might have awaited me had I entered that dark farmhouse. Story 2 by Winston S. As a groundskeeper at our town cemetery, my job is typically mundane despite the eerie atmosphere some might expect. One unsettling feature is the old gravestones adorned with bells, remnants of centuries-old superstitions. One summer night, around 10 p.m., I began my usual routine at the cemetery's outpost, a small brick building housing maintenance tools and security screens. I locked the main entrance gate, noticing a figure in a black hoodie walking along the fence line nearby. Returning to the outpost, I reviewed the day's reports until around 11 p.m., when I retrieved the ATV used for yard work. Driving through the graveyard, I checked each gravestone for damage and collected stray flowers left by visitors. Spotting a lone figure amidst the gravestones, I approached, intending to offer assistance assuming they were grieving. The person, however, seemed oblivious to my presence, staring ahead with a haunting smile. When I addressed him firmly about the closure, he responded with a sudden lunge towards me, striking the side of the ATV. Managing to escape, I rushed back to the outpost, calling the police as I barricaded myself inside. The night turned tense as loud banging on the outpost door followed, shaking the small building. With no means of defense, I awaited police arrival, relief flooding in as the assailant fled before they arrived. Despite an official report and search efforts, the intruder was never apprehended, leaving me to ponder whether his actions stemmed from grief or something more sinister. Story 3 by Colin. Living in a cramped, outdated house in a rough part of town with my brother, we were both eagerly saving to move out. My work at the hospital had me on overnight shifts, while my brother worked mid-shifts at a local grocery store, leaving us little time together. One day, on my scheduled night off, I maintained my nocturnal routine, waking at 8 p.m. to greet my brother returning from work. After breakfast, he retired to bed, and I settled into the living room for a night of Netflix. Unexpectedly, a car pulled into our driveway, its headlights illuminating the front window. Curious but cautious, I peeked outside and noticed a man standing in the rain by our porch, having exited the vehicle blocking my car. Deciding not to answer, I watched as he returned to the car and they drove off, leaving me unsettled but not overly concerned. As I resumed watching TV, exhaustion overtook me, and I dozed off briefly. Awakening to the sound of rain pounding outside, I noticed the front door slightly ajar, panic surging through me. Convinced my brother might have ventured out, I cautiously secured the door and called out to him. Silence followed, the house still and unnervingly quiet. Ascending the stairs to check on him, I found his room door wide open, an unsettling sight given he should have been asleep. The sound of movement within confirmed my worst fears, and as I approached, 2 men burst out of his room, knocking me over in their haste to escape. My brother pursued him as I dialed emergency services, recounting the chilling break-in. The intruders fled into the night, leaving us shaken but physically unharmed. Their motive remained unclear, leaving us to speculate whether we were targeted or simply victims of a random intrusion. Within months, we relocated, seeking safety and peace of mind after the harrowing ordeal. Each story encapsulates a moment of fear and uncertainty, reminding us of the dangers lurking in the ordinary and the importance of vigilance in the face of the unexpected. Story 4 by Andre G. Asterisk. This happened when I was 18, on a road trip from my hometown to my new college. I had all my stuff crammed into the trunk and backseat of my old SUV. It was not only my first long solo drive, but also the first time I'd be away from my family for an extended period, so naturally, I was nervous. The journey was supposed to cover 600 miles, split over 2 days of driving. I followed the directions from my GPS, estimating I'd reach the hotel by 11 p.m. Considering possible delays like traffic, fuel stops, and meals, I knew I'd likely arrive much later. By 7 p.m., the sun had set completely, and most other cars had disappeared too. Occasionally, headlights from passing cars would briefly illuminate the road ahead, but for the most part, it was just me. Driving alone for so long made me increasingly tired and bored. Around 10 p.m., I decided to stop at the next gas station before completing the final stretch of the journey. About 10 minutes later, I exited the highway and pulled into a gas station. It was isolated, not even part of a town, just a few pumps and a small convenience store. There were no other cars on the road or in the lot, and no lights from nearby buildings. I parked at a pump and began refueling. As I glanced around, a man approached me. He was much older, maybe in his 50s, and looked rough, possibly homeless. His sudden appearance startled me, but he wore a brief smile. "Hi, do you need something?" I asked, hoping he wouldn't come any closer. The man stopped a few feet away, looking around cautiously before speaking. "Take the exit back onto the highway," he said. I was puzzled. "The exit I came from," I clarified, gesturing behind me. The man nodded. "Okay," I replied hesitantly. He walked off, leaving me confused. The exit he referred to was a one-way road. It made no sense. There were no signs of construction or blockages. It looked perfectly clear and functional. Putting the pump back, I got into my car and noticed the man sitting against the convenience store. The more I thought about his odd advice, the more uneasy I felt. Could this be some kind of trap? Trusting my instincts, I drove toward the highway entrance instead. As I merged onto the road, I realized most of the street lights were out. I slowed down, thinking it might be a construction zone. Keeping my focus on the unlit road ahead, I suddenly glimpsed a figure to my left before a pickup truck appeared out of nowhere and stopped in front of me. 4 men, armed with bats, machetes, and knives, jumped out of the truck and ran towards my car. Their faces were exposed, their expressions blank and cold. I quickly reversed, creating enough distance to see more people emerging from the shadows. Some even attempted to chase me as I frantically reversed out of there. Once I turned around and sped off, I called 911, though I never received any follow-up. It was as if they hadn't even checked. Ironically, it was the strange man at the gas station who had initially tried to steer me away from whatever danger awaited. Whether intentional or not, his advice might have saved my life. I count myself incredibly fortunate to have escaped that terrifying encounter. Story 5 by V***. It was a typical Friday after my college classes, and I was out doing DoorDash. This was my routine, a weekend dash to cover my living expenses on campus. The night started well. I completed several orders, making decent money. However, after the dinner rush, orders dwindled to low-paying ones, hardly worth the time. After an hour of aimlessly driving, a decent order finally came through, 8 miles away, with a payment worth the trip. Most of the deliveries were near campus, so heading 20 minutes out was unusual. The road led through fields, with sporadic houses and mostly empty stretches. The last 10-minute drive was eerie, passing through vast, dark fields and arriving at a house tucked away at the end of a dirt driveway. The house was barely visible, illuminated only by a porch light. I parked and prepared the delivery bag. Stepping out into the quiet night, I felt a strange unease. The house appeared abandoned, with no signs of life beyond the porch light. It seemed odd, but I had an order for this address, so someone had to be there. As I approached the door, knocking twice yielded no response. The silence was unsettling. I noticed the house looked neglected, almost abandoned. The only light came from the porch, powered by a solar battery, a detail that struck me as odd. Just as I began piecing together these thoughts, I heard a vehicle approaching down the dirt path. My attention shifted to the headlights now behind my car. I called out, asking if it was the customer, but the figure by the car remained silent and still. Adrenaline surged as I realized the potential danger. In a split-second decision, I dropped the bag and sprinted back towards my car. Running through the field, the grass grew thicker and taller, shielding me from view. I made it to a nearby yard, where I could call the police. They arrived and checked the scene but found nothing amiss, no signs of the mysterious figure or their intentions. I was shaken but relieved to have escaped unharmed. Story 6 by Anonymous, ***. As a truck driver for nearly 20 years, I had driven the cross-country route countless times. The familiarity of the roads, truck stops, and routine gave me a sense of comfort, until that one night. About 20 hours into my latest journey, a storm slowed my progress. It was late, and I was scanning for the next truck stop to rest. Suddenly, lights appeared behind me, startlingly close despite the flat, straight road. The vehicle approached fast, disappearing behind my trailer, then abruptly turned off its lights. Concerned, I maintained speed, keeping an eye on my mirrors. The suddenness of their approach in a stormy night raised suspicions. Could it be an attempted robbery? Thankfully, a truck stop sign appeared 5 miles ahead. I sped towards safety, keeping watch for any sign of the vehicle behind me. The road was empty, and I saw no headlights in my mirrors. Relieved to reach the truck stop, I pulled in and parked among a few other trucks. Rain hammered the roof as I settled in for some much-needed rest. However, my sense of security shattered when a loud thump shook the truck. Startled, I opened the door to investigate. Outside, I saw a car with its headlights off and figures moving around. One man approached, ordering me to stay put. In that tense moment, I realized I was being targeted. Helpless, I sat as they inspected my truck, then abruptly left. I called the police, but the culprits vanished without a trace. I was fortunate to escape unharmed, but the incident left me shaken, reminding me of the dangers of the road.